In the narrow, dusty streets of Davao, where tropical heat embraced zinc rooftops and barefoot children ran between improvised shacks, young Manny Pacquiao faced a daily battle against the poverty that plagued his family. At just 12 years old, his small, thin body concealed a fierce determination that manifested in every punch he delivered to the improvised sandbags in the neighborhood's small gym. Days passed between helping his mother sell cigarettes on the streets, sporadically attending school when conditions allowed, and training boxing with a passion that transcended his childlike understanding. It was in this context of struggle for survival that fate placed in his path the coach Roberto Delgado, a middle-aged man with experienced eyes and calloused hands who had dedicated his life to boxing without ever achieving the stardom he had dreamed of in his youth. The training sessions, under the guidance of the experienced master, became life lessons that went beyond boxing techniques. While teaching the youngster how to correctly position his feet, deliver precise blows, and protect himself from opponents' attacks, the mentor also cultivated values like discipline, perseverance, and humility. The exhaustive hours of training under the suffocating heat of the Philippines forged more than muscles in the aspiring fighter. They shaped his character and established an almost paternal connection between the boy who had never known his own father and the man who had never had children. When Manny turned 17, an opportunity arose to fight professionally in Manila, the country's capital where lights shone more intensely and possibilities seemed infinite for a talented young man. The decision to leave was painful, but necessary for someone who carried on his shoulders the responsibility of lifting his family out of poverty. The night before his departure, the old master gave his pupil his most precious possession, a pair of worn-out gloves that had belonged to a Filipino champion from the 1970s, a treasure kept with the hope of one day finding someone worthy of inheriting it. The farewell was brief and filled with contained emotion, typical of men who had been taught to hide their vulnerabilities. Neither imagined that moment would mark the beginning of a separation spanning nearly 2 decades, during which the humble boy would transform into a world sports legend, while his mentor would remain in the shadows of the same modest academy, training new dreamers with the same dedication, but watching from afar, through television screens in local bars, the meteoric rise of the one he considered his son in his heart. The years passed like consecutive rounds in an endless fight, and the name Manny Pacquiao transformed into a synonym for national glory in the Philippines. His victories weren't just personal achievements, but collective triumphs that echoed from the streets of Manila to the most remote provinces of the archipelago. Each belt conquered, each opponent defeated, each record broken fed the pride of a people accustomed to facing difficulties with resilience. While camera flashes captured the image of the world champion in 8 different weight categories, few knew the humble origins and sacrifices that paved his way to the top. In contrast to his former student's upward trajectory, the old trainer faced the challenges of age and financial limitations. The old gym where he had trained the young prodigy had deteriorated further with the passage of time, with leaks forming puddles during frequent tropical storms and equipment surviving only thanks to constant improvised repairs. Living in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Davao, the master watched with silent pride Manny's fights on the television at a local bar when his own television presented technical problems, which occurred with disturbing frequency. Contact between the two had been lost in the whirlwind of commitments, international travels, and obligations that fame imposed on the boxer. Occasionally, the mentor received indirect news about his former pupil through local newspapers or conversations with other community residents. The few attempts at communication had been frustrated by the barrier of advisors, businessmen, and security that naturally surrounded an international celebrity. Over the years, the champion maker accepted his role in the backstage of the success story, finding satisfaction in knowing he had contributed to the initial formation of the one who had become a global icon. On a particularly hot Sunday morning, while organizing the few functional pieces of equipment in the gym for another day of training with local youth, a sharp pain in his chest forced the old master to sit on a time-worn bench. The diagnosis, when he finally agreed to visit the small-town hospital, was not encouraging. Heart problems that required regular treatment and possibly surgery beyond his financial means. Just as he had taught his fighters to face stronger opponents without showing fear, the old man faced his own battle with silent dignity, reducing his workload at the gym but refusing to completely abandon the young people who depended on his guidance. In sophisticated meeting rooms in Las Vegas, between million-dollar contracts and negotiations for new fights, Manny Pacquiao never forgot his roots. The boxer, now also a congressman in the Philippines, maintained a team dedicated to social projects in his native country, building schools, hospitals, and community centers with the fruits of his successful career. During one of these philanthropic meetings, while discussing the construction of another sports center for underprivileged youth in Manila, a memory from the past unexpectedly emerged in his mind. The wrinkled face and calloused hands of his first trainer, the one who had believed in his potential when even he didn't fully understand what the future held. Nostalgia gave way to concern when he realized he had completely lost contact with his mentor over the years. Determined to correct this involuntary injustice, Manny designated a special team with the sole mission of locating his former instructor and discovering his current situation, without creating a stir that might attract attention from the media, always eager for stories involving the Filipino celebrity. The information that arrived weeks later provoked a mix of sadness and urgency in the champion's heart. The old master was still alive but facing serious health problems under precarious conditions, still dedicating his last energy to training young boxers in Davao. The gym where Manny had taken his first steps in the sport was about to be demolished to make way for a commercial development, and the former trainer had no resources to start a new space or even ensure adequate medical treatment for his heart conditions. With the discretion he had learned to cultivate for his most personal projects, Manny organized not just a surprise visit to his former mentor, but a complete plan to transform his life. Architects, builders, and lawyers were secretly mobilized to acquire land near the community where the old man lived and build not just a comfortable house, but also a modern training center that could perpetuate the experienced instructor's legacy. While preparations advanced under absolute secrecy, Manny mentally revisited the lessons learned in the sweaty morning training sessions under the firm yet gentle guidance of his mentor. The discipline, perseverance, and above all, the humility that the master had insisted on cultivating had been fundamental to ensuring success did not corrupt his character. During the most challenging moments of his career, when pressure seemed unbearable or defeats threatened his spirit, it was the old man's words that echoed in his mind, providing the necessary strength to rise and continue fighting, not just in the ring but in life. The sun rose lazily over Davao when a discreet convoy of 3 vehicles with darkened windows traveled through the still sleeping streets toward the humble neighborhood where the old master had maintained his unchanged routine for decades. It was a Sunday, a day when the experienced trainer allowed himself the luxury of starting later, dedicating the morning to Mass at the small local church before opening the gym for the few students who appeared on weekends. When the former instructor returned from church, walking slowly with the aid of an improvised cane, he found a group of people who appeared lost, consulting a map near the entrance of the decrepit gym. The typically Filipino hospitable instinct made him approach to offer help, without imagining that moment would completely change the course of his final years of life. The reunion transcended words, manifesting first in looks of recognition, followed by a tight embrace that defied the years of separation. Silent tears ran down the mentor's wrinkled face while his fragile arms wrapped around the strong shoulders of the man he had helped form, not just as an athlete but as a human being. Manny, in turn, felt again like the insecure boy seeking approval in his master's eyes, discovering that despite all the titles conquered and applause received around the world, the recognition from this simple man still held immeasurably special value. After the initial moments laden with emotion, Manny invited the old man for a ride, explaining he had something important to show. The car journey lasted only a few minutes, but represented a journey through shared memories, with the champion recalling events from the first training sessions and the former master impressed by the precision of his ex-student's recollections. When the vehicle finally stopped in front of a newly constructed property, with an elegant gate discreetly displaying the name Delgado Training Center, the old man remained silent, unable to process the magnitude of what he was witnessing. The complete surprise came with the exploration of the place, a spacious and comfortable house, adapted to facilitate movement for someone with physical limitations, connected to a modern training center equipped with cutting-edge technology, blending the best of modern equipment with traditional elements that harkened back to the roots of Filipino boxing. Every detail had been carefully planned, from the ample yard with typical fruit trees of the region to a special room where trophies, photographs, and mementos of the former instructor's career, many of which he didn't even know records existed, were displayed with reverence, including recovered images from his own days as an amateur fighter. As they walked through the spaces of the new property, Manny explained that all documents were already in the old master's name, that the training center would be maintained by a foundation created specifically to ensure its continued operation, and that a specialized medical team was available to follow his heart treatment. The most moving moment occurred when Manny led his mentor to a special room, where an exact replica of the old, deteriorated gym had been recreated, with the same worn equipment, peeling walls, and even the characteristic water stains on the ceiling. Before the old man could question the reason for that space amidst the modernity of the rest of the center, the champion explained that the environment represented the place where he had truly been born, not as a person, but as a fighter and a man. During the surprise presentation, a discreet film crew captured the genuine reactions of the former instructor, with Manny's prior permission, who wished to document that moment not for immediate display but as a historical record of gratitude to his mentor. However, one of the assistants, moved by the scene he was witnessing, couldn't resist the temptation to share a brief clip of the reunion on his social networks. The post, showing the exact moment when the old man understood that the house and training center would be his, captured the pure essence of gratitude and recognition, values increasingly rare in a world of ephemeral celebrities. Within hours, the video crossed borders and linguistic barriers, being shared millions of times around the globe. Local journalists soon discovered the location and gathered around the new property, eager to capture more details of the story that was moving internet users from different cultures. What Manny had planned as a private gesture of gratitude involuntarily transformed into a viral phenomenon that highlighted universal values such as loyalty, recognition, and the importance of honoring those who contributed to our growth, regardless of the time elapsed or the distance that separated us. In the days that followed, as the story gained space in international television programs and inspired discussions about gratitude and recognition, Manny remained by his mentor's side, protecting him from excessive media harassment but allowing the old trainer to enjoy the well-deserved public recognition. In a carefully selected interview for a respected Filipino channel, the champion expressed with simplicity the motivation behind his gesture. It wasn't just about financially repaying for technical boxing lessons, but honoring who first believed in the potential of a hungry boy when everyone else saw just another poor child destined to perpetuate the poverty cycle of previous generations. The viralization of the reunion between Manny and his former master transcended simple media interest, provoking deep reflections in Filipino and international communities about the value of gratitude and the lasting impact of mentors in shaping young talents. In schools across the archipelago, teachers used the video as a pedagogical tool for discussions about values, while sports coaches from different modalities revisited their approaches, inspired by the old man's dedication under adverse conditions. The experienced instructor, initially uncomfortable with the sudden exposure, gradually understood that his story served as inspiration for other educators who worked silently in the shadows, forming the character of future citizens without expectation of recognition. In the months that followed, the Delgado Training Center transformed into a hub for developing young talents, attracting not only aspiring boxers, but also researchers interested in documenting traditional Filipino training methodologies that were being lost over time. With his knowledge finally valued and recorded, the old master experienced a sense of completeness that transcended the material comfort of his new residence. The former trainer's health showed significant improvements under proper medical care, as if the body itself responded positively to the late but sincere recognition. The relationship between Manny and his mentor flourished anew, with the world champion visiting the center regularly between his international commitments, often participating discreetly in training sessions, just as another apprentice absorbing the wisdom of the old master. For the young boxers, the vision of the legendary Pacquiao, attentively following the experienced instructor's instructions, served as a powerful lesson about humility and continuous learning. On these occasions, the champion deliberately placed himself in the position of a student, reinforcing the authority and respect due to the trainer before the newcomers. The most surprising metamorphosis, however, occurred in the community itself around the training center. What initially was just a sports project organically expanded to meet local needs. Remedial classes for children, vocational workshops for unemployed adults, and basic health care for the elderly in the region. Following his mentor's example, who had always seen boxing as a tool for social transformation beyond sport, Manny authorized the expansion of the project's scope, transforming the Delgado Center into a true catalyst for community development, where boxing served as a gateway to broader opportunities for personal and educational growth. On the first anniversary of the center's inauguration, a modest celebration gathered important figures from sports, local politicians, and mainly, community residents who had witnessed the neighborhood's transformation. In his speech, the old master, visibly healthier and more energetic than the year before, shared his vision about the true meaning of success. Not titles or public recognition, but the positive impact left on others' lives. With characteristic simplicity, the former instructor stated that his greatest legacy wasn't Manny Pacquiao, the world champion, but all the young people who, through boxing, found discipline, purpose, and alternatives to crime and drugs that plagued impoverished communities in the Philippines. Among the special guests was a group of the experienced trainer's former students, men who never achieved international fame but who built dignified lives applying the principles learned in the old gym. Mechanics, fishermen, police officers, teachers, ordinary citizens who carried in their values the silent influence of the former coach. The reunion of these ex-students, some of whom hadn't seen each other for decades, created an atmosphere of brotherhood that transcended social barriers, with shared stories about how the ring's lessons had shaped their decisions in critical moments of adult life. The ceremony included the inauguration of a scholarship program personally funded by Manny, designed to ensure that no talented young person would need to abandon studies to pursue a boxing career. The initiative, named Beyond the Ring, reflected an evolution in the old master's mentality, who, in his youth as a trainer, focused exclusively on athletic development, but now understood the importance of formal education as an essential complement in the integral formation of young people. The program symbolized a historical correction, offering opportunities that Manny himself didn't have in his youth, when he had to leave school to dedicate himself exclusively to boxing due to financial necessity. An exciting surprise awaited the mentor during the celebration: the exhibition of a series of video messages from world champions of different nationalities, all expressing admiration for the work of the old Filipino trainer who had remained in the shadows for so long. Boxing legends like Mike Tyson, Floyd Mayweather, and Lennox Lewis sent congratulations, recognizing the fundamental role of dedicated trainers like the former instructor in preserving the essence of the sport. The tribute, secretly organized by Manny through his network of international contacts, demonstrated the universal respect for masters who dedicate their lives to developing talents without seeking personal recognition. As night fell over Davao, enveloping the Delgado Center in soft shadows punctuated by welcoming lights, Manny and his former mentor walked slowly across the well-maintained lawns, sharing memories and reflections in a conversation that flowed with a peculiar intimacy between master and disciple. The air carried the characteristic aroma of tropical vegetation mixed with distant sounds from the community. Children playing in nearby streets, music emanating from simple houses, the occasional motorcycle engine cutting through the growing silence. Those everyday sounds, which many would overlook, represented for both the living essence of the Filipino culture they had helped elevate before the world. In that contemplative walk, the old man revealed to Manny a detail kept for decades. On the night before the young fighter's departure to Manila, the former instructor had invested his years of savings in an audacious bet on his protégé's first professional fight. The money won from that bet wasn't used for personal benefit, but converted into basic equipment for the gym, allowing other young people to continue training in his absence. That never-shared story perfectly symbolized the essence of the man, someone who constantly reinvested in others, without seeking recognition or personal return, finding genuine satisfaction in others' growth. The conversation naturally drifted to the future, with the mentor expressing his vision for the center in the coming years, not just as a trainer of boxing champions but as a space for integral human development, where young people would discover their unique potentials, whether athletic, intellectual, or artistic. Boxing, explained the experienced master, was just a vehicle, a metaphor for life's challenges that required discipline, resilience, and ethics. His hope was that the center would transcend the sport, becoming a replicable model in other needy communities of the Filipino archipelago, creating a network of safe spaces where young people could develop fully. When the first stars began to dot the Filipino sky, marking the end of that historic day, the pair returned to the main house where guests were still animatedly conversing. The video that had captured their reunion a year earlier continued inspiring millions around the world, generating not just momentary emotion but concrete actions. Trainers being recognized by ex-athletes, forgotten mentors being rediscovered, values of gratitude and reciprocity being rescued in an increasingly individualistic society. As they walked side by side, master and disciple, now united by a shared mission of social transformation through sport, they represented the concretization of the Filipino proverb that the old man had so often repeated in difficult days. Ang hindi marunong lumingan sa panangalingan ay hindi makakarating sa pararunan. He who does not know how to look back to where he came from will never reach his destination. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.